Maybe I'm just seeing things through rose-colored glasses, but as I remember it, 2016 was an incredible time to be a PC gamer, with many cherished and or still relevant titles released that year such as Doom, Dark Souls 3, Overwatch, Stardew Valley, Titanfall 2, and Street Fighter V. There was a little something for everyone. It was perhaps an even more exciting year for hardware enthusiasts, as Nvidia had just launched their incredibly robust and efficient 10 series graphics cards, which even today are still used by over 6% of PC gamers. Even their competitor, AMD, shot back with the capable and affordable 400 series lineup, which was one of the last true budget-friendly graphics card generations, with the top-end RX 480 going for as little as $230 US. To complement these fine choices in graphics acceleration, Intel's then fresh and venerable Skylake-based processors were both very capable and affordable. And the best part about it all is that the great GPU shortage of 2017 hadn't happened yet, so not only were all the options available to the consumer rather powerful, they were affordable too. This was all very helpful to a 15-year-old me, who had no real source of income outside of occasional odd jobs that were only slightly more significant than routine chores. Let's flash back to October of 2016, where I unknowingly started my journey in building my first gaming PC. I picked up a used XFX Radeon HD7750 graphics card on Craigslist for $30. My original plan for this card was to use it to upgrade my family member's Core 2 Duo PC, which I made a video on back in the day. During this time, I had also been saving up for a PC I could truly call my own. I knew I wouldn't have the money for the GTX 1060 I had dreamt of anytime soon, but I managed to scrape together $470 to get a whole system put together. I started off with the mid-range i5-6500, 8 gigs of Corsair RAM, and a 2TB Seagate hard drive to really give myself some storage headroom. A huge upgrade from my 4th gen i5 laptop. Less exciting, but equally important, was the EVGA 500B to power it all, and the Corsair 88R to house it. All that's missing from this list is a graphics card, but as we now know, it just so happened that I already had a fairly capable one on hand. Now, these days, using the word capable when you're discussing the HD7750 is sure to get you some laughs. But at the time, it was only 4 years old and still getting driver updates, so it made sense to use while I saved for the 1060 I was destined for. Though that reality would not last. At the time, I was collecting lots of cheap hardware, and a little over a month later I picked up a used GTX 660 for $50, which is a much faster card, so that got priority as my daily driver until I would once again upgrade. The disparity here is that I gave a rightful test to each of my personal use graphics cards except for the 7750, which, as a quick tangent on the topic of upgrading, I'm actually still using the same PC today. The only changes I've made have been replacing my RAM for a 32GB kit and picking up a used i7-6700 to squeeze out a little extra processing power. It's always so strange to me to think that my computer is approaching 9 years of age, and even more so the fact that as of writing this script, the 7750 is now a 13-year-old card. Now, I'm sure you're waiting for me to go over the specs of the card. And I intend to do so, just in a less technical manner than I used to, since this is more of a retrospective video. The HD7750 was built on a much smaller 28nm process compared to its older sibling, the HD6750, which has a 40nm processor. Only a brief look will lead many to believe that the 6750 should be a faster, more efficient choice than the 7750, given that the former boasts an extra 208 shader cores over its newer iteration. However, the 7750 offers more modern and advantageous features. For example, it's sporting 460 million more transistors, has support for DirectX 12, plus, and this is a big one, a much lower TDP of 55 watts, which enables it the luxury to run only pulling power from the motherboard, whereas the 6750 requires a single 6-pin. This is very beneficial to users who are just upgrading a pre-built office machine that likely has a very anemic power supply. The 7000 series also brought with it support for PCIe 3.0. Now that we've had an overview of the card, let's talk about what you came for, the benchmarks. But honestly, it'd be really off-brand of me to just throw this thing in my computer without a signature cleaning and repasting. And come on, you didn't think I'd clean it without Old Reliable, did ya? And And as much as I trust Contact Cleaner, I'm not risking it in my personal PC. So after throwing it in the throwaway PC, and yep, looks good. Still works. And, because it wouldn't be an adventure if it worked the first time, the first go around it gave me a CPU light. Then it decided it wasn't supported by Windows 10. And then it decided to change my primary monitor. That one was weird. But it worked in the end. The games I selected for the benchmarks are somewhat random. I decided to do a mix of games from around the 2016 era as well as a few modern titles I enjoy. I wanted to have some fun with it and really push this card to its limit, so I first ran the benchmarks at stock speeds, then I overclocked it and reran the tests. When available, I used the game's built-in benchmark, but for every game lacking one, I played it in the most repeatable way I could think of. For example, in Battlefield 3, I played the level Rock and a Hard Place, and began FPS recording from the point the cutscene ends to about the halfway point in the mission after the second major battle. I also did all the benchmarks while I wasn't running any screen recording software to ensure I was able to maximize frame rate and minimize instability. I gotta say, I was almost disappointed with this card until I took a step back and looked at it more critically. I had to remind myself that it is not 2016 anymore, and that once again, this is a 13-year-old graphics card as of making this video. That feels so weird to say out loud. It makes me think of the 20-year-old truck in my mind versus 20-year-old truck in reality memes, because much in the same vein, when I think 13-year-old GPU, I'm thinking more along the lines of this. Testing Black Ops Cold War started as more of a joke, and then the game actually launched, and I was genuinely amazed, so I had to give it a go. And honestly, the game was playable. Did it look absolutely horrific? Sure, but the frames were stable the majority of the time, and you could play the game. And I did the tests on the pretty large Outbreak Zombies mode. Multiplayer was even more smooth. And though the game did come out around the same time the card did, the fact that it ran Battlefield 3 so well on medium settings was impressive, given how demanding that game was on hardware back then. And this is all from a GPU that retailed for just $109, which is absolutely unheard of today on the new market unless we're talking about cards that are effectively e-waste. So, overall, I can't say I'd recommend this card for an ultra-budget gaming build. It is incredibly old, and for the same price, or a little bit more, there's plenty of newer options that are similar in characteristics, but have better specs overall. One such specification being VRAM amount, for example, because that was a huge limiting factor of this card. I think a 2GB model could have done a little better because a few games I tested were demanding at least 1.3GB, which the card just couldn't provide. The 7750's time has come to an end, but it had a damn fine run, providing respectable frames to low-budget gamers for nearly a decade. Unfortunately, my particular 7750 showed signs of slowly dying during testing, as often the colors would artifact and I had issues with certain games just not launching at all. But I'd say it isn't all doom and gloom. If nothing else, it has a bright future as being an ultra cheap display adapter, if all you need is to power up to 3 monitors for nothing more than productivity. Alternatively, if you just like displaying old hardware, these XFX Ghost Edition shrouds look so cool. I'm glad I was able to run this card through its paces one final time, and I'm glad to have viewers like you along for the ride. Thanks for watching.